Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am filming a video about some of my top tips for first-time travelers. I know that traveling for the first time, whether you're alone or going with a group or a few friends, can be kind of intimidating. I know on my first trip abroad, I was crazy overwhelmed with all the things that I wanted to do and nervous about being by myself for the first time. Even though I was with a group of people, it was the first time that I was away from home and that I was overseas in a foreign country. So it can be a lot to take in for first-time travelers. Hopefully today's video can provide you with some tips to make your first travel experience nothing short of incredible. These tips are aimed at making your experience as easy and efficient as possible, and maybe reminding you of a few things that you may not have thought of when you originally started planning your trip. So without further ado, let's get into it. My first travel tip for first-time travelers is to research your destination ahead of time and do it very thoroughly. So that means making sure that there are no travel advisories for the city you want to go to, or if they are, what kind of travel advisories are they? And obviously if there is a travel advisory and you're uncomfortable, then go somewhere else. There are millions of places to visit in this world, and you'll definitely have the chance to revisit that place again. So make sure that you're putting yourself first and really considering your comfort level and not overestimating it, because the last thing that you want to do is arrive in a country that you thought you were prepared to take on and get there and things are not what they seemed, and you wish that maybe you had just stuck with your gut and gone somewhere else instead. Other things to consider when researching your destination are, do you need vaccinations? How are you going to get around? A lot of places Uber isn't legal, so are you going to take public transit? Are you going to rely on a cab? Are you going to rent a car? And a lot of other places, Airbnb isn't legal, so you need to figure out, are you going to stay in a hostel or a hotel, and can you afford that? These are things that can be found out quickly through a quick Google search. Travel advisories can usually be found on your government's website. So the Government of Canada usually has a website listing all of the different countries and whether there are travel advisories out and what the reason for those advisories are. And then Uber and Airbnb, things like that, a quick Google search, you can figure out where they are legal. Another thing that I would say is read a lot of blog posts from people who have already traveled to these destinations, because you may be more comfortable renting a car, but if all the blog posts that you read are telling you that renting a car is going to be crazy expensive and parking downtown is ridiculous and rush hour is crazy, then maybe you should try to push yourself out of your comfort level in that way to take public transit, because it'll make your trip that much more enjoyable, or else you're going to end up stuck in traffic for the majority of your travels, which will not be very fun. So tip number 2, I guess this goes hand in hand with researching your destination, is to know the local customs. So it's really important to remember when you're visiting a new place that you're a guest in that country or that city, and these people have welcomed you, and it's really important to respect that and be aware of that and do everything that you can to appreciate their culture and not diminish it in any way. And this is something, unfortunately, that I've witnessed a lot traveling through Europe. Travelers from North America not really wanting to understand the culture, I think, is the problem. So, make sure you research local customs before you book your trip. There are certain places where women can't wear shorts. They need to cover your knees. So especially in certain places, even in Europe, if you're going to Vatican City, you can't go into a lot of the churches there if your knees are uncovered, and people will still do it and they will get away with it, but it's honestly just a little bit uncomfortable for everybody involved. Another huge thing to consider when researching your destination and considering their local customs is the language barrier. Now, language barriers aren't as big of a deal as I think some people worry about, especially first-time travelers. If you're going to France, or you're going to Portugal, or you're going somewhere where maybe English isn't the first language, the language barrier isn't going to be as much of a problem as you think it is. The simple fact is a lot of these countries do speak English. However, I wouldn't go there expecting everybody to speak English. I think it's incredibly ignorant and unfair when English-speaking travelers visit these countries and get frustrated when people have, broken English or maybe aren't quite understanding what they're saying. And I think that's really something that we take for granted here in North America, that all of these European countries, English isn't their first language, but they learn it because of their tourism industry and because of people like us. So I think that if they're making the effort, we should make the effort. So if you're visiting somewhere with a language barrier, you know, download Duolingo on your phone and take a crack at practicing some simple words. You know, things like hi, hello, and thank you. Those will go an incredibly long way. You know, I think it's fun to be able to, even if you're just saying hello, correspond in another language, and the locals will definitely appreciate you at least making the effort to embrace their culture rather than get frustrated with them for not understanding yours. Another local custom to try to research before you go is what is the standard for tipping in that country. There are some areas, you know, in North America, obviously here we tip, you know, 15 to 20% at restaurants and things like that. There are other countries around the world where tipping isn't mandatory or tipping is offensive, so maybe just find out ahead of time what the standard for tipping is in that country, just so you aren't left in an awkward position at the end of your meal one day when you're traveling. Tip number 3 is to make sure you have all of your documents in order. Things like passports can take months to renew, and you can't travel if your passport is going to expire within 6 months of your travel date. So I would say that, you know, I am crazy about these things, so when my passport's getting on that 1 year mark, I would probably go ahead and renew it already, just to be sure with the amount of traveling that I do. Now, I'm not going to have that problem for a while because I went ahead and did the 10-year passport renewal, which I would recommend to anybody who's able to do so, just because it's done, you don't have to worry about it. But passports can take quite a long time to renew, so if you're planning a trip and you know your passport's getting close to that 6-month mark, I would renew it right away. If you can do the 10-year one, I would highly recommend it. I don't know what the standard procedure is for other countries, but I know in Canada we have a 5-year and a 10-year option, so if you can do the 10-year one, be sure to do that. Also, be sure to find out if you need a visa to visit the destination that you're going to. Some countries require certain citizens to obtain a travel visa or a tourist visa when visiting, so find out if you need that ahead of time. You know, make sure you apply for it early enough, first of all, because that's another thing that's going to take time, and then find out what the cost is so you can budget for it, because they are typically around that $100 mark. And the last document to make sure that you have in order is travel insurance. I would highly recommend that you have travel insurance before you go away. I would not travel without it, just in case. I mean, you never know what could happen regardless of if you're traveling or you're at home, and I think it's just far more important to be safe than sorry. You know, especially myself, I do a lot of US travel, and obviously their healthcare costs there are outstanding, and if something were to ever happen to me while I was traveling in the US, I would not be able to afford it without travel insurance. So I think that it's definitely worth it to make sure you have it ahead of time, just to give yourself the peace of mind so you don't have to worry and, you know, constantly be anxious while you're away, just to give you that buffer. So if something goes wrong, or even if a flight gets canceled or a bag gets lost, or, you know, if something gets stolen while you're away, travel insurance can help you cover all of those things, and I think it's just a really great peace of mind, especially for your first time away. You're going to be worrying about so many other things that you can just put that aside and check it off as done, so you don't have to worry about that as well. Tip number 4 is to budget and consider money. I always advocate that anybody can travel, and you don't need to have a large sum of money. You can travel as a student, you can travel, you know, if you're working part-time, and you can totally make it work. And I definitely stand by that. I'm a student and I work several part-time jobs, and I'm still able to make it work. So regardless of your financial situation, you can definitely travel. You just need to be smart about where you're going and how you're spending your money, because obviously certain destinations are going to be cheaper than others. So when researching your destinations, you know, you're going to want to keep in mind costs. It's going to be far less expensive to visit somewhere like Thailand than it is to go to Paris. And then also you're going to need to find out, you know, what is the currency in that country. So, you know, research that ahead of time and figure out, is it worth it to get cash in these other currencies or just one currency? Also determine if you're going to be able to access cash while you're abroad, because that's going to be a huge determining factor in how much cash you take with you. Obviously, I don't recommend walking around with thousands of dollars of cash in your pocket. That's a surefire way for something awful to happen. So, you know, when you're budgeting ahead of time, account for how much cash you think you're going to need, and then how much you want to take out right off the bat, and then figure out if you're going to be able to access cash while overseas. And if you're not, how are you going to be able to access extra funds? So, you know, most countries will accept credit cards from, you know, North America, and standard like Visa and MasterCard are typically accepted in most countries, but that's another thing to look into. Will your destination accept all credit cards? You know, Amex is a tricky one where not everybody takes it. Make sure you're accounting for that and that you have a plan in place for how you can access funds while you're abroad. If for whatever reason, you know, you do blow through your cash, or you know, what if you get robbed and all of the cash you had on you is gone? So I know that sounds kind of dramatic, but you know, you want to be sure of these things ahead of time and account for them before you even get on the plane. So again, you have more peace of mind. Another big money thing to consider is how much to bring. I'm going to go ahead and say that everything is probably going to cost twice as much as you think it will. For my first few trips to Europe, I devastatingly under budgeted, and I ended up paying for it afterwards. So literally. But when you're planning, you know, how much you think you're going to spend on food or drinks or excursions, I honestly would double that number to be safe. And I know it sounds like a lot, but things cost a lot more than you think they do, especially if you're going somewhere like Europe. And, you know, I think that even just having that buffer room of doubling your budget is just reassuring, because what if you know, you're traveling and you meet some friends and they want to go out for a drink? If you haven't budgeted accordingly, then, you know, you might not have the money to go out for a drink, but, you know, you want to because you just met these people, and then you're kicking yourself and thinking, I should have listened to Emily and budgeted double. So I would say whatever you think your trip's going to cost you, double it. My other rule of thumb for budgeting for travel is if you cannot afford a return ticket back home, you can't afford to travel. And I know that sounds dramatic, and I know that I personally have broken this rule myself, but, you know, like I said, I'm preparing you a lot for worst case scenarios in this video, and I hope that I'm not deterring people from traveling or making you think that all of these awful things are going to happen, because chances are they're probably not. But my rule of thumb is that you should always have enough either room on your credit card or cash in the bank that if for some reason there's a natural disaster or a civil war and you need to get out of that country fast, you can buy a return ticket home. And obviously, like I said, the chances of that happening are very slim, but it's just another thing to have as a backup, as a safety net, to give yourself that peace of mind while you're away. The next tip is don't overbook. This can be so tempting, especially as a first-time traveler. You know, I know you probably have hundreds of things that you want to see and you're trying to cram them all into this itinerary. If you spread yourself too thin, you're going to be incredibly disappointed at the end of your trip. Chances are you're not going to have time to do everything that you think you want to do. You need to account for, you know, if you stumble across an amazing restaurant that you decide you want to stay there for a few hours, or if you meet some people who want to go out for a drink, or you just, you know, spontaneously run into another adventure. I think that you need to allow some flexibility in your planning to stumble upon things like this, because some of the best trips and memories that I've had have come from unplanned experiences and things that I've just stumbled upon and said, yeah, what the heck, in the moment. So allow yourself the opportunity to say yes to these adventures as they come up. And you're not going to be able to do that if you've jam-packed every single minute of your schedule. And like I said, even if you stick to that schedule, chances are you're not going to get to it all and you're going to go home disappointed. So to avoid that, I would say pick out a few of the main things that you know you want to see and hard schedule those in. So, you know, you're going to go see those for sure regardless of what happens, but allow yourself some flexibility on other days or half days to just explore freely and allow yourself the opportunity to say yes to the spontaneous adventures. So my final tips all revolve around safety. Now, I know this is a lot of a big concern for first-time travelers, especially if you're going alone or if you're a woman. This has been, you know, this is always everybody's sort of front of mind when they're thinking about going abroad on their own. You know, is it safe? Am I going to be safe? How can I stay safe? You know, you get a lot of those questions from your family members too, who are concerned about you going somewhere for the first time or on your own. I've never felt unsafe traveling. I think that a lot of people think traveling is more dangerous than it actually is. And, you know, as long as you're smart about it and you're going to good places and you're remaining vigilant, you're going to be fine. I think one of the easiest things that women can do when traveling is to dress conservatively. Dressing conservatively is just, I think, important, and I know it's frustrating to even have to say, because I think obviously that women should be able to wear whatever they want, but when you're traveling alone in a new country for the first time, you know, maybe that's just not the best time to exercise that right. And I get it, it's frustrating, and it is ridiculous that we even, you know, need to dress a certain way in order to be safe. We should be able to dress however we want and be safe, but trying to be low-key and blend in is also another great way to protect yourself from robberies while abroad, because obviously people who want to pickpocket you are they're looking for tourists. So if you stand out as some clueless tourist who hasn't researched the local customs and is wearing a miniskirt when they're supposed to have their knees covered, you're going to be easily a target for theft. So if you dress low-key and just try to fly under the radar, you're obviously going to protect yourself from, you know, any unwanted sexual attention and unwanted theft. I don't know what kind of theft is wanted, but and then my last tip for staying safe while abroad is to remain vigilant. You know, don't walk around with your head in your phone. First of all, you shouldn't be doing that anyway, just because you should be taking in all the sights and breathing in all this new culture and these new experiences, and having your head in your phone is really gonna take away from that. So, you know, don't walk around with your head down texting. Never walk around with headphones in. I don't know why people do that, like where I'm from. It drives me up the wall. It makes me nervous. So don't walk around with headphones in, and just, you know, pay attention to your surroundings. You know, like I said, you should be looking around and taking in this new culture and these new sights, but also just be extra attentive. You know, be able to notice if someone's been following you for a little bit too long. And again, I know that sounds scary, and chances are it's not going to happen, but it's just important that you're aware of these things and you're able to spot them. I feel like all those safety tips were a little bit depressing or overwhelming, so like I said, like, you really don't have much to worry about. The chances of anything happening are so slim, and I only bring these things up because I just want people to be prepared and to have peace of mind, especially when traveling for the first time. But as a first-time traveler, I think the best and biggest piece of advice is to be confident. Act like you belong there and act like you know what you're doing. Even if you don't, just fake it, okay? It will get you out of any uncomfortable situation, and acting confident can, you know, translate into real confidence. And I think that traveling alone is going to really help you build up that confidence if you feel like you don't have it right now and you do have to fake it. I think that at the end of this first trip, you will have so much more confidence, and you'll be able to, you know, face these situations head on and not feel overwhelmed or anxious, and just be able to go at it and have a good time and not be worried about all of these other things. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that it was helpful. If you are a first-time traveler, leave me a comment down below and tell me where you're going. I would love to hear about where your first travel experience is taking you. And if anybody else has any other tips for first-time travelers, feel free to leave them down below as well. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.